Thank you for tuning in to Ungentrified with Kent Johnson. Ungentrified takes an unfiltered view on pop culture, music, television and film, politics, current events, and topics central to the worldwide Black community. Ungentrified is a safe audio space for celebrating Black culture in its purest form. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Ungentrified. I'm your host, Kent Johnson, and I'm ready to talk about this topic today, and I'm glad that I have somebody to talk through it with. But before we get into the deep dive, we're going to hit some of the current events and give our hot takes on it. So are you ready to talk about what's going on in the news?
Yeah, let's do it, man.
All right. So the first thing that we're dealing with is this article that came out recently about millennials in the workforce. And as I was reading this article, one paragraph really stood out to me, and I want to hear your opinion on this. So a study was done on millennials in the workforce and how really this is their area now. They're starting to push baby boomers and everyone else out, and like 1 in 3 working adults is from the millennial generation. And we've had arguments over what that means, but they define millennials as someone who would be age 21 to 36 in 2017. So if you were born in 81 through 96, you would be considered a millennial. I was born in 81. I don't necessarily consider myself a millennial unless it works to my benefit, but in this case, I wouldn't. But the one thing that really stood out to me, and it made me give a side eye, was this paragraph in regards to millennials being really the ideal worker. And all we hear in the news, especially like in the last 2 years ago, is how millennials have killed this or killed that. But it was showing millennials in a good light. And the reason why they felt like millennials were the ideal employees was because they found that millennials worked harder than any other generation, putting in, on average, 45 hours a week, with 21% taking on another job to make ends meet. And 66% of people in the millennial group were expected to work past the age of 65, which is generally around retirement. And 12% of those people said they don't see themselves ever reaching retirement or retiring. And this study pointed out that millennials were less likely to take all of the time off that they accrued. And on top of that we didn't have any kind of work-life balance. We were checking our emails during after work hours. Like, we were always, quote unquote, on. And I looked at this, was like, this is terrible for millennials. Like, we have acknowledged that we're not making enough money, so we have to take on second jobs. We have already given up on the idea of retirement because all we hear is Social Security is going to run out by the time we're of age. And
right.
It was just like, no, this sounds depressing. Like, this is not good at all. This is not the kind of employee that you want. I saw that and I was like, yeah, I don't know if they were being funny, but this is terrible. I don't know. What's your take on that?
I mean, so I kind of agree and kind of disagree. So I think it depends on like the lens in which you're looking at it. For me, so I do a lot of kind of work in the space, like working with diversity and multi-generations in the workplace and stuff like that. And what I see is I see a lot of my peers that are like my age, I'm a millennial, putting in extra work and having multiple streams. Because for one, a lot of us have like passion projects. Like, I know myself, I have passion projects outside of work. And I do consider that work and like me working. And two, I know a lot of millennials have the burden of student debt, and, you know, to have the like quality of life that they want and that they see on Instagram and that they see like all of these other folks having, like, they got to put in overtime. They got to work and get multiple streams of income just to kind of like pay off student debt as well as have that quality of life that they want. So, I mean, I do see it in that regard. And I know I'm like interested in, who they studied or like who the sample group was from the study and how like diverse it was and like what type of jobs that they have. Because this whole thing of like not retiring at all and like working past the age of 65 or 70 or whatever it said, that I don't agree with. I don't know anybody that's trying to like not retire. Like all my people are trying to retire at like 35 or like, do something and retire early. So that I don't necessarily agree with unless it's like people like starting their own businesses and like wanted to do that and never retire. I can see that. But I think it's interesting. I think it's, accurate to an extent, but to your point, like the lens that they put on it makes it seem like millennials are just like workhorses and like die hard for their 9 to 5 in corporate America and never going to retire. And I don't think that's the case.
Yeah, it sounds like we've just given up on the future. Like we just know that we're drowning in debt. Another hour is it doesn't mean anything because I'm going to die in debt and, and I'm not going to use all of my time off because I might lose my job. Yeah, it read really depressing. I was like, I don't know who's happy about this.
And I don't know anybody that's not trying to take their time off.
Right.
Like, I know people are scrambling trying to get some more time off.
Right. Yeah. I'm curious as to what the set of people were that they reached for this survey. Another thing in the news, TMZ recently chatted with the actor Travis Turner, who is a voice actor for Netflix's Spy Kids. So this movie was set to come out. I think it came out today, actually, but he voices the character Psy, which is a black character, but Turner is white. So TMZ, one of their folks approached him and asked him whether he considered that the black community might have an issue with him being a white man voicing a black character. And he said he thought about it, but he brushed it off. And he's quoted as saying, if they want, they can say whatever. I actually come from an urban background. I lived in motels. This is what he said. Then he said they know that I relate to the urban community. What? Then he goes further and like tries to justify it by saying like, I admire certain black celebrities and I once worked with Snoop Dogg. It's kind of like some of my best friends are black kind of moment.
Right. I have black friends too.
Right. And then he goes into character and voices like a line from the movie. And line, I almost kind of choked on vomit when I read this, was I wouldn't step foot in that club unless I can nay. You know what I'm talking about? So I can't imagine a white man. Well, I can't imagine it. Like he's probably living out fantasies being able to be a black character. But you living in motels doesn't equate an urban background, whatever an urban background might be. But it's like none of this is okay. I don't have any problem with him necessarily voicing a black character, but I do have a problem with his idea of what the black character would be saying because of a urban background. Like it's very limited. What's your take?
So, I mean, I get it. I'm not necessarily mad at him for voicing the black character. I get that you getting paid. I do have a problem with, I don't know who, like if it's Disney or Universal or whoever. Now there's plenty, of black voices that can do the voice of black characters. So, I'm kind of side-eyeing their staffing and how they're kind of like staffing some of these projects a little bit. But to the point of the article, yeah, I feel like, I don't know if he felt like he was back in a corner or what, but the whole article was pretty like ludicrous and like his like making, staying in a motel, making him relatable and can empathize with the black community, because that actually makes no sense. Him breaking out into character to TMZ, that makes no sense. I don't know. I just side-eyed this whole kind of article and side-eyed him. It really doesn't make too much sense to me.
Yeah, the fact
it was like a hard article to read. Like, it was really hard for me to read.
Yeah, it got progressively worse as you read, and then I was like, so are you equating the entire black experience as an urban experience? Which is problem number one. Then you living in like you have your own white experience and be appreciative of that.
But there's plenty of white people that live in motels. Like, what does that got to do with the black experience or urban experience or whatever? That once I got to that line, that's when I was like, I can't even focus on the rest of this article.
Yeah, but that, a lot of times that seems to be the general consensus of what a black experience is. Like that we've all lived the same way. But it was just like, man, I hope that you know that this is all bad. Like it's not going to be in your good interest at all. Like you could have easily have been like, I was picked to voice this character, but I appreciate the fact that he is representing some of the, so many other people. And I know I've taken, care to make sure that I've done justice to this character, but no, he chose another path.
And it's not like he's like 18 years old either. Like he's 30 years old. Yeah. He's a grown man.
Right. Well, in white people's eyes, he's still a child until he's like 70. But yeah. The final thing on our news roll today is about a divorce, which we're never happy about unless it's good for both parties. But this one has kind of gotten people up in arms, namely women. So Candace Parker, WNBA star, endorsement deals out the yang, like great WNBA player, was married to Sheldon Williams, who basically rode the bench the whole time in his career, had a $12 million contract, but this was 10 years ago, almost 12 years ago, rather. He played for 6 years, hasn't played for the last 4. So she's been carrying the weight in the home, not only playing for the WNBA, but also in the offseason playing overseas, which goes to show just how underpaid and undervalued women are in their jobs. The fact that she is a WNBA star and had to take another job outside of the country to live is bananas, while he sat on the bench and made $12 million. But they get divorced, and she ends up having to pay spousal support because, he's gotten accustomed to a way of life over the last couple of years of him chilling. So people are going crazy. Like I said, namely, a lot of the responses I saw were from women not understanding why. And I think it's easy to want to know why, because we're always used to it being flipped. And I think a lot of people were missing the point in this. And I mean, it's all about clicks. So when people write these articles, they lead with the thing that's going to interest people. And the thing that interests people is the fact that he's getting paid and she's not. But she ends up paying $400,000 for spousal support. But this is a one-time payout. Like, she's not paying him monthly. This is to clear the books. And people got lost in that key point, as people generally do. They just overlooked that part because their anger had already boiled up just by knowing that she was paying him out. But what's your take on that?
So this article is kind of funny to me too. It's just the way that it's written, and kind of like you said, the point of a lot of these platforms is kind of to have clickbait and to get their clicks and things like that. So at first thought I was like, "Ooh, this is about to be a good read," and then I read it, and they played oh boy throughout the whole article. Like, he's a decent player, spend his time hand clapping and high fiving his teammates. I was like, dang. But to the topic, I agree with you. It's like, if roles were reversed, how would we feel? There's so much discussion around gender roles nowadays and equality and gender equality and things like that. So if the roles were reversed, would people still be reacting the same way? I would put my money on probably not.
Right.
And like you said, it's a one-time payout. So I think people are just kind of taking the headline and running with it, and not really kind of thinking about, the implications and gender roles and the fact that it's a one-time payout and not a monthly payment. So, I mean, I'm cool with it. It makes sense to me. But again, I don't know all the details. I just know what I read, and there's a slant on a lot of articles that I've read on the topic.
Yeah.
So it kind of is what it is.
Yeah, it's actually smart. It's like, here you go. I wipe my hands. I'm chilling. Go about your day. But people were just having a field day with this. And it always, this is a whole nother topic, but it always frustrates me how people just don't read. And I'll see articles float down my timelines that I've read already, and I see people's take on it, and I'm like, you only read the first paragraph, if that. Like you didn't even click the link to read.
You did a quick skim, or you just repeating what somebody else said. So.
Right. The take is so hot that you didn't even bother to try and read it. It drives me crazy, especially when things are like really important and people just don't even bother to read. But yeah, this was a perfect example of people just being mad at a title and not at the body of writing around it. But I know at this point you guys are probably figuring or trying to figure out who I'm talking to at this moment. So I'm going to let that person introduce themselves. So go ahead and let the people know who you are.
What's going on? My name is Brandon Miller. Currently a resident of Dallas. By day, I guess I'll give you guys a background of who I am. By day, I'm an IT consultant, and I also work in the workplace diversity space. So doing a lot with inclusion and diversity in the workplace. And then outside of that, serial entrepreneur with a branding and nonprofit philanthropy slant. I started 2 nonprofits, the first being the Black Purdell, where we focus on supporting, promoting, and cultivating young Black entrepreneurs, especially those that are students. The Two Fly Fundraiser, which is a fundraiser, a nationwide fundraiser where we raise money to provide travel grants and passports to students in underserved communities and students in financial need. And then lastly, the Be Great brand, which is a branding agency and motivational platform. So I know that was a mouthful, but that is Brandon in a nutshell.
And I love how you're actually a pure example of the millennial that we mentioned in that article earlier, where this is my day job, but at 5 o'clock, I'm clocking out and clocking in to the other gig. But at least you do have a retirement goal in mind.
Oh yeah, I'm not working. I'm not trying to work past 65.
Right.
If I have anything to do with it.
Look, I'm not trying to work past Monday, so I can't even understand how people have gotten that figured in. But to move on, Brandon and I are going to have a deep discussion about a particular topic. But before we do that, Brandon, I ask everybody that comes on the show what's on their radar at the moment. So it could be something that's currently hot to you, a new food you discovered or rediscovered, new album, new Netflix hole you fell into. What's caught your attention recently?
Man, I think it's the same thing that's caught like a lot of folks' attention over the last 12 hours. Like J. Cole's album just dropped, KOD. I got a chance to listen 1.5 times, and it's dope. It's a dope project in my opinion. It hits on a lot of topics. Production's great. Track list is fire. So yeah, I think that's a hot topic for me right now.
Yeah, J. Cole is always a very divisive artist as far as fans. Like people love him, hate him. There's very few people who are in between, and I think I'll fall in that in between line. Like I appreciate what he does. I like some of his tracks, but I know some diehard J. Cole fans. And last year I went to one of his shows, and it was a great show, but it was crazy to see his hardcore fans go in. So I know they're having the time of their lives right now. Like I said, that's all I've seen on my timeline this morning is everybody posting, snippets from tracks and lyrics and going in. So I'm going to take it with me on this flight I have tomorrow and give it a run through. But yeah, that's on everybody's radar at the moment. For me, I've been listening to Lena Baraz's new album, Kind of Hard. I did a first run. You know how you listen to an album a first time and you may not be in the space to really receive it, and you got to put it down and come back to it a couple of days later or a year later in some cases.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, I know exactly how you feel.
Yeah, that was one of those. It came out, I think, 2 weeks ago, but when I first heard it, I think I was in the mood to be turned up. So everything is very mellow and low key, and I was like, man, this is whack. And then
I don't got time for this right now.
Right, this is not the space I'm in. And then on a rainy day a week ago, I let it play, and I was like, oh, this is kind of it. So that's been on replay for me right now, the Lena Baraz album. So check that out if you haven't already. But yeah, so let's go ahead and get into today's topic, which is knowing your place in the community and to give a little background on this. I'm very adamant about people being appropriately them. So doing what you're best at, being age appropriate, just highlighting the best parts of you and doing that and giving that out to the world so that people can receive that and that be like your history. But when it comes to our community, we look at that with a different lens. And I brought Brandon on because I thought he would be the best person to talk about it because he does a lot of work. And on the outside, it looks like he does a lot of different things. But when you really look at it, he's doing very centralized work. And I felt like in conversations we've had, we kind of had the same struggles around this topic. So it would be great to have somebody else's opinion on it. But I think, and this is me being super general, a lot of times in our community, when people get to a certain point or level of success or access, those who may not have gotten to that point, and sometimes those who have, look at you as an individual to become Superman for the community and to save everybody. And that's not your job. What is your job is to be the best version of you for your community and give in that manner. And we don't see that a lot of times. And people fuss and argue and discuss this, repeatedly and never come to a real solution. So, Brandon, I ask you, do you think that we personally have a duty to uplift other Black people?
Yeah, so thanks for the intro too. That's a great first question, and I think I'll catch people off guard when I say no. Like, I think it's our duty to be good people in general, and that's part of just how I was raised. It's part of like being a Christian and things like that. We have a duty to be good people, but like when you put the burden of like uplifting all Black people in all aspects of our lives, like that's a huge burden to like carry on your back. And I would say people that are passionate about it, people that identify and connect with it, will, in their pursuit of like their passion and their pursuit of being a good person, and having kind of like a responsibility for their passion and their purpose, they will uplift other Black people. Like, I think, somebody that's kind of living their purpose and living their passion, maybe they're just, maybe they're a doctor, and they're their best doctor that they can be, and they're Black. That in itself is uplifting other Black people, and it's providing a role model for the next generation, and it's inspiring like a whole culture and a whole race in itself. But I think when we try to like put the burden on, it's my job to better the Black experience, to better Black people, or however you want to look at it, it gets burdensome and it gets heavy and it gets tough. But I think, to your point, being the best version of yourself and living your purpose and your passion the best way that you can in itself will uplift other Black people. So that's kind of my take on it.
Yeah, I'm partially with you. I do think we have a duty to uplift other Black people. We don't have a duty to uplift every Black person. I can't do that. Yeah. That's not a burden I can take on. I can uplift the portion that I'm supposed to, and do that really well and give them the tools to in turn do the same thing and really have a domino effect versus a sledgehammer effect. If that makes sense. But I think that's what it is. We all, not all of us, some of us don't care about the rest of us, but there are many of us who, have taken on this duty of being a beacon of light in some form, but we don't know how to manage that with everybody's expectation of us being a beacon of light or a source of light for everybody. And it really boils down to, do we know how to be responsible members of our community? Have we found the appropriate balance for giving back in the right way? And I don't know if we have. I don't know. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, that's a good question as well. I think there are avenues that have kind of been laid out on like what it means to be responsible, and kind of some of these like tenets of equal opportunity, equal access, supporting our community, circulating the Black dollar, supporting one another, collaborating. Like, those ideas are out there, but I don't know if it's like, and I don't even know if it exists or if it needs to exist on like a rule book of what it means to be a responsible member of the Black community. Like, I'm kind of torn and going back and forth in my head on, if that's something that's even needed. But to like thinking about what's kind of going on culturally right now, I think that there's a big, huge kind of push in a holistic view, especially when it comes to like artists out there and musicians and different like moguls. Like if you think of the Diddy's, you think of Beyonce, you think of Jay-Z, you think of Oprah, and they're starting to kind of instill that movement of taking care of one another and taking care of our community and promoting equality. So I think it's a topic of conversation, but I don't know if it's like a concrete, like these are the 10 commandments for how to be a responsible member of the Black community. I don't think that exists right now.
Yeah, I don't think so either. And because of that, like we place the burden of saving everybody on everybody in our community. And it takes me back to, there was a dinner party I went to a couple of years ago. A friend of mine had come into the city and had invited all of his friends in Atlanta. And we didn't necessarily know one another. It was like 15 people at this dinner. And this really dope Ethiopian restaurant, Desta, but that's besides the point. We were at dinner, you know, everybody's talking, getting to know each other, and the topic of like doing your part in the community came up. And one of the things that kind of rose a brow for me was an organization that I'm a part of, the Emerging 100 of Atlanta, that came up in conversation. So I kind of laid back a little bit and didn't jump to raise my hand and say, oh, I'm a member, and let people talk, you know, in their natural space about the organization. So we, as an organization, came up as an example of somebody or people who weren't doing everything that they could in the community, and that we were only doing it for the gram or for the visual, you know, the visual kind of purpose of it, not to actually be of benefit, but to get clicks and likes and repost. And I posed the question. I was like, so what do you think they're not doing? And nobody could answer. But I was like, you know, their focus is on doing mentoring work for an all-male high school in Atlanta. They take the seniors there and get them ready for whatever real world they're planning to go to, whether it's college or getting a job. They help them get their mindset for becoming an adult Black man in whatever space they may go into. That is the core premise and mission of the org. And everything we do is in support of that. We may do other things, but ultimately that's the goal of the organization, because that's what we can do well as that group of men. And once I was explaining that, I was like, you know, if you guys can't tell me what they're supposed to be doing, how can you say they're failing and not doing their part in the community? And it's always that turnaround was like, okay, well, what are you doing in your community to make an impact? And of course, everybody's silent on that end. And then it's like, if they do have something to say, I was like, oh, but that's not everything. So whatever answer you give me isn't everything. So why do you expect that of so many other people? And you brought up like Diddy and Oprah and Beyonce and Jay-Z. Like we put that burden on them too. Like they got to save everybody. It was prime example of a clapback when Oprah had her school for girls open up a couple of years ago, and some guy tweeted her and said, you know, well, there's other things going on in the world. Why aren't you doing this? And why aren't you doing that? And she came with a list of, oh, but I am. And, you know, I don't see your name on the list of people doing shit. Like, what are you doing to affect change? And of course, mum's the word. It was crickets. It was silence. And I can't understand why we have put that burden on other people instead of allowing people to just do their part and do it best, you know?
Yeah, I agree. And I look at it, I think we share maybe similar kind of mindsets. Is like, you got to think of it like a puzzle. Like there's 1,000 pieces. There's 1,000 things that we can work on as a Black community to empower and to get better and to build and things like that. And you know, we each have kind of like a piece that we can do. If we try to solve the whole puzzle, you know, all at once, it just doesn't happen like that. You can't just like put all the pieces together at one time. It takes everybody kind of doing their part to collectively think about the whole Black community, you know, holistically and as a whole. And, you know, I completely agree with like kind of your response with the Emerging 100. example, because I see that as well too, is like one of my nonprofits, Institute for Life Fundraiser, we focus on giving students in underserved communities the opportunity to travel abroad. So we provide passports, we provide travel grants to students in need so they can get abroad. But we do that through fundraising, and the way we fundraise is by throwing parties and day parties and brunches and concerts and things like that. So people will see, oh, you're throwing turn-ups and stuff just to kind of get exposure and to get your name out there. But what are you really doing? And when they peel back the onion, they see, oh, you really are like doing something in the community, this, that, and the third. So, kind of similar to your Emerging 100 story. But kind of my view on, I feel like people will see, kind of like power resources and expect you to do what they would do with it. So maybe you have money, maybe you have influence or a huge following or resources, whatever it is. And they see that you have that and they want to apply it to what they would do if they had it. It doesn't really work that way. We kind of talked about, like, as long as you're living your passion and you're doing what you can and working on your puzzle piece, we're moving in the right direction. But it takes kind of the whole village and everybody doing their part to make that change on that, holistic, 1,000-foot level.
Right. I'm glad that you brought that up. It goes back to actually one of the articles we were just talking about how people just don't read past the surface of it. They see the picture of the turn up and don't see the purpose or the work that comes with the funds that were made from the turn up. They just assume it's a turn up. Right. Or, they see a snapshot of what you did that day and assume that you posed for the camera and that was it, when you were out for hours doing this kind of work. And it's so easy to comment on the things that don't require further research into versus putting. It's easy for people not to put the effort into finding out the good that you're doing. It's so easy to comment or make a quick judgment or a hot take on things. And then, that's one of the downsides of social media is that, we put ourselves out there for whatever reason. It may be for inspiration. It may be for soliciting donation, but it could be perceived in so many different ways as an attention grab or purely for social currency. And that's not what it is, but it's easy to do that and roll on. And then there's the hard lesson that people don't want to learn. And it's learning that you can't save everyone. No matter what you do in this world, you cannot save everyone. And that, for me, it was a lesson I learned actually kind of early on. It was my first year out of undergrad. One of my first jobs out of undergrad was as a teacher. I taught middle school English for 2 years in Baltimore City. And I had a vicious argument with one of my homies about the work I did. And I told him, I was like, I can't save every student that comes into my classroom. That's not my job. My job is to teach the curriculum and save the ones that I can. I can't save everybody. And it's like, if we look back at our educational careers, as we were going through from kindergarten to 12th grade and undergrad and so forth, we can identify the teachers that made an impact or turned a light switch on or made something click for us. And it wasn't every single teacher we had, but me as a Black male teacher, which was, a unicorn in a sense that way, I was tasked with saving everybody in my classroom. Every kid had to be enlightened by Mr. Johnson in some way. And I was like, I can't do that. And I can't take that burden on. I'm not going to drive myself crazy trying to save someone who I wasn't meant to save. Maybe, it's supposed to happen for him next year with his math teacher. Maybe it doesn't click for him until the last minute before graduation. I can't. And then I can't force that onto these students either. I can't force myself to be their savior. That doesn't help anybody in this case. But people don't want to learn that lesson. And it's kind of like a bright-eyed, bushy-tailed look on it. Like, I'm going to save everybody and do this. It's the same thing that people encounter when they're thinking about going to law school. And I was the same way when I applied. I was like, oh, I'm going to do this and I'm going to be this in my community. I'm saving everybody. I'm doing this. I'm reversing this. Then you get through law school and you're like, I can't do this shit. I can't save everybody.
There's only 24 hours in a day.
Right. And it's like you become a better person realizing that, okay, these are the people that I can save by the work I do. I'm going to save them. Because if I don't save them, then that's where I'm falling short. But if I'm trying to save everybody, I can't do that. And people don't want to learn that lesson, or you learn that lesson by actually attempting to do it. And when you don't attempt to do it, you can be that person who's pointing fingers at everybody else for not doing it. But it's a hard lesson. And like I said, not everybody gets a chance to learn it. It's been thrown in my face twice. It was like, oh, just in case you forgot from when you were a teacher, we're going to present that same thing to you in law school. You can't save everybody. And I think it made me a better person because I really focused on, the work that I was supposed to do and being great at that. And even like in your platform, the work you do would be great. You give so many different examples of how people can do just that. And it's not just be great. It's, be great at this or, channel your energy in the best form.
Yeah. And I think so that kind of taking out the, the quote unquote saving everybody piece. And if you just kind of look at it as like exposure or like getting your name or your mission or whatever it is out there. This is like a topic that I have with a lot of like my branding clients and when I'm coaching folks on building their brands. And initially when I first started to, build their business, they want to touch everybody. They want everybody to know who they are. They want to be able to get their ads in front of everybody across the country, no matter how old, no matter how young, no matter what gender. Like they just want everybody to know what it is that they do. And it's not feasible, and when you're thinking about impact and you're thinking about like making those connections, because at the end of the day, connections is what business is all about. It's what quote unquote saving everybody is all about, is making those connections. And I always tell people, go for depth, find like what your niche is and go for depth in that regard. And kind of when you kind of funnel down what you're really trying to do and who you're really trying to help at the end of the day, and you go for depth and you go for those personal connections, those people that you connect with automatically kind of turn into your advocates and turn into marketers for you. And you talked about kind of like what I'm doing with Be Great. And by no means am I like trying to sell my shirt to every single person and to sell my message to every single person, but I'd rather kind of make a connection with anybody that's interested. And the next thing that you know is once they figure out like what you're all about and your mission and your vision and what problem you're trying to solve, and you connect with them on that personal level, I now have a team of hundreds of people marketing for me because they understand what the mission is and they feel kind of connected to it. And I think that same kind of like branding advice and principle goes with kind of helping others and uplifting the community. The better we are like making those connections in our niche field and with our niche group, everybody's going to start becoming advocates and seeing the impact of those connections and that value. And, we kind of grow exponentially as a people rather than, that one person trying to save everybody.
Right. Yeah. I think it's really hard for people, and it doesn't even have to deal with being helpful to someone. It's just hard for people to be honest and say no and acknowledge that like, no is okay, because you may set yourself up for something that you can't really do just because you want to be a help. And when history comes down to being told to somebody, you want to say, well, at least I tried. But sometimes it's saying like, that ain't my space. Like I can't be the best person for that. And I don't know if we know how to do it.
You saying no can like be enabling somebody else's yes. So like if I understood that, okay, maybe this is not my ministry to like do this. Like this is not for me. I should be saying no to the situation. That will point that person, to the right person for it and to solve that problem. So we're blocking a lot of people's blessings by trying to do everything.
And on that note, we're going to take a brief break, but we'll be right back to wrap up this episode of UNGENTRIFIED after a word from one of our sponsors. This episode of UNGENTRIFIED is brought to you by Fresh Heritage. Looking for premium grooming products created to amplify your beard game? Fresh Heritage's natural and organic beard oils are carefully crafted with ingredients used in the grooming traditions of our African ancestors, such as pure argan oil and organic jojoba, coconut, and sunflower oils. Their products keep your beard soft, shiny, and conditioned without the use of any harmful chemicals and ingredients. Head to freshheritage.com and take 15% off your first order when you use the promo code UNGENTRIFIED at checkout. Brandon, you mentioned earlier about being a good Christian, and in our community, the church is something that is epicenter to a lot of our lives. Do you think that the Black church in its current state has kind of changed how we as a community help one another? Because if you look at the church, the Black church in 2018 versus the Black church in like 58 or 68, it's a completely different institution than it was then, and it has a different role in the community than it did before. But has it changed in any way, like how we help one another?
I think I may not be. I'm only speaking from my opinion and my perspective, but I don't think its usefulness and its value changed at all. The Black church that I attend and the churches that I've attended, I think they all kind of have that familial and educational and resourcefulness that it's always had. It's kind of been that central location, for our people, quote unquote. I think what has changed is what's surrounding the Black church. So if you think back in like the 50s and the 60s and even before then, the Black church is all our community had. Like that was the only place that we had to convene and to let our guard down and to get educated on what's going on and to rally around a cause. That was the only place for it. Now there's so many other avenues. There's so many other places where we can converse. There's so many other places where we can kind of huddle around a cause and make impact and make change. So I don't want to say by any means that the church is kind of like diluted. I just think there's more resources around the church as well. So it's, some people still utilize it for what it was back then. Other people might not utilize it for that same purpose anymore, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And when you really look at the Black church, when you read past the title of the article and look at the article for the Black church, they actually are a great example of utilizing your skill for the best interest of everybody else. Like it's, if singing is your thing, you got the choir, that you bring the joyful noise. That's how you help that community. If
right.
Watching the kids is a good thing, you handle it Sunday school. If it's, cooking the chicken or the catfish for the fish fry or the revival.
Right, they got something for everybody.
Right. There's a ministry for everybody. Isolate your great and do that for everybody. Don't steal that. Don't put that on a shirt. Let me write that down. Isolate your great.
Right. Let me go file the copyright
right. But yeah, like they're a perfect example of like, okay, we have all of these areas where you can be the best person at and do that. Do that for everybody. That's your space. Do it well. That's what we want you to do. This is how you do your part in the community. But yeah, but we look at the surface of it and we're like, oh, people aren't doing, the Black church isn't doing what they used to, because we again have placed that Superman mentality on everybody. But they're doing their part for their community, which is how it was before. But now, since community takes on so many different ideas, it could be, the community of your zip code or the community of everybody in the world, because we're all so interconnected in ways that we weren't in 58 or 68 versus now. So it's always interesting point that people always bring up when it's like the church not doing their part. And it's like they kind of are, but just not in the same vein that they may have been doing 50 years ago. But we keep putting that expectation on them. And it brings me to another idea of somebody not, quote unquote, showing up, because we always get accused of not showing up to church. But are Black men not showing up for our community? What's your take on that? Do you think we as a part of this community are not doing everything we could, or are we, and people are putting that superhero kind of approach on us?
This is interesting too. Like for me, like the first question is like, what does showing up mean? Like if you say we're not showing up, what is it that, and this is like quote on like verbatim kind of your emerging 100 discussion, what are Black men not doing that you want them to do? I think that's like identifying that is part one, and I don't necessarily know what the answer to that is. But I think, and this isn't, I don't want to like circumvent the question, but we do a lot of like finger pointing of like, oh, well, you don't do this, you don't do that. And there's never like really clear expectations on, you know, what we should be showing up for. Are we showing up for the family? Are we showing up for our kids? Statistics show that, you know, we actually are. Are we, you know, what else are we not showing up for? I guess that's my first question. So I would kind of like disagree with that. I know the Black men that I'm surrounded with and that I work with and that I see and that are kind of like in my community. I see a lot of them stepping up and doing things and starting businesses, rallying around a cause, empowering others. So I don't know if I'm kind of blinded based on the company that I keep, but I would say I don't see it. So if you see it or somebody sees it, feel free to DM me and let me know because I'm interested.
You know, it goes back to that, you know, what is that responsibility? Everybody says we have a responsibility, but it's not defined by anyone. And then if it is defined, how fair is that to us as individuals to say that, well, I can't do that, but this is how this is how I show up, or, you know, this is what I do. And it's one of those things that we just keep going in a circle around, but as that circle keeps rolling, we keep saying that people aren't showing up. And like you said, that the guys that I know do show up and show up regularly. It's we can't fault people for not showing up in the way that you have put an expectation on them to. You know, as long as they are doing their part, you can't say nothing, or you shouldn't be able to say nothing about that. But we do get a lot of people saying stuff, especially our elders. Like they look at us now versus, you know, them back in 58 or 68. And they feel like we aren't doing enough in our community. We aren't connected enough. We aren't giving back, or we aren't, you know, doing this, that, and the third to be a betterment for our community. Do you think that's the truth? Do you think our elders are right that we aren't doing enough?
Yeah, I would definitely say we're doing it differently. And, like, I think, you know, yes, we're Black people, and, you know, our elders acted, thought, lived differently than we did. They had different resources than we did. They had different values and motivations than we do. But I wouldn't limit that to like a racial thing. Like, I think at the end of the day, we also have to remember that we are people, there's different generations at play. There's different genders at play. There's socioeconomic differences at play. A lot of the experiences and the tools and the technologies that we have are different than they were, you know, years ago. Activism, and I know people have different perceptions on that. That's huge, kind of, for this generation, our generation, and that wasn't a type of showing up for our elders. The way that we enact systemic changes and have those discussions, that's different than our elders, like the capabilities that they had back in the day. So I think showing up is different, and it looks different than our elders. So that might be part of kind of why they make those assumptions that, you know, we're not showing up or we're not doing enough just because it's different than how they did it.
Right. And I think they put that superhero mentality on us because they're like, we gave you the ability to do so many things now. You are a superhero in our eyes. Like you've gotten farther than we would have been able to in a lot of spaces. So how are you not possibly able to do everything for everybody? I think that comes into play too. Like they see us as freer than they are, more upwardly mobile, we're more connected, we're more educated in a lot of senses. So that to them, we have all the tools to help everybody, you know, and they can't really understand why we don't or we're unable to in their eyes. But you know, a lot of us are doing the work, but just in a way that makes sense to us in 2018 and with multiple jobs and all of these other things going on. So yeah, I think that's just a disconnect between our two generations, is that they feel like they gave us everything to do these things, and they don't understand why we aren't doing it in the way that they expect us to go back to a point you made earlier. But, we talked about the idea of people doing it for the gram and for social currency and not for the true benefit of people. And I do see this often, and it frustrates me, but I also have to kind of take a step back from that thought and be like, well, ultimately someone was benefited in some way. But there are a few people who I see, I'm like, you don't have to take a picture every time you give food to the homeless, or you don't have to take a picture every time you give a shirt off your back to somebody who was on the street. You don't have to do it. Like, take the Oprah approach, take the Beyonce and Jay approach, where, people are mad at them because they think they're not doing anything, but then they're like, bam, here you go. I'm giving $100,000 to HBCUs. I've been, giving money to the Black Lives Matter movement for years. I've been doing it. You can say whatever you want, but there are some people who can't live without that approval. So can we be mad at them for doing it for the gram because they are really helping somebody? Or, what's that space? How should we approach that?
Yeah, this is like such an interesting topic to me, because like I get it. I understand. Like we hate to admit it, and our older generations hate to see it, but we are not even become a social driven society, like social media driven society. The Facebooks, the Twitters, the Instagrams, the Snapchats, like that's what kind of quote unquote kind of governs how we act, and it's kind of sad, but it's honestly the truth. So for individuals that don't necessarily have kind of the resources like Oprah and Beyonce and Jay-Z, like they got, bags in the car, they got stacks on deck, like they can kind of do that stuff behind the scenes and make that impact, and still kind of align everything that they're doing kind of with their brand and what they value. But some people just can't do it like that. And, I'm thinking of the nonprofits especially, and like the philanthropists that are trying to grow their brand and grow their influences so they can do more. They kind of have to post on social media to kind of get the exposure and to get the traction. And doing so, if they're doing it for the right reason, they'll kind of gain influence and be able to expand kind of what they're really trying to do. Now that's case A. Case B is, the person that's just doing it for likes because they need likes to feel better about themselves and to motivate themselves. And, that's when it starts to get a little bit unhealthy. And that's when it's, why are you really posting this? Are you really passionate about giving back, or are you passionate about, the social currency that we've been talking about? So I think case A is helpful. I understand it, and I think it's beneficial. Case B, I think that's when you start having the discussions on, that's not necessarily healthy. That's not necessarily the best look for the community. So I kind of like divide it in those two kind of groups.
It reminds me of Cory Booker early on in his political career, where he was quote unquote Superman, and people were sending him tweets about what was going on in his city, and he's going out to fix it. And, there's somebody following him, documenting everything. And it was very public, his superhero abilities at that point. And it worked for him and against him, because now you have set this expectation, oh, Cory's going to fix it all. Like, Cory's going to do everything. And what happens for that one time when somebody sets out a call and you can't fix it? Or when does it go beyond you as a person? And I'm always for don't do it for the show, for the circus around it. Like, don't make a spectacle of the person you're helping, because we see that a lot too,
right?
Where it's like, especially, and this is outside of our community, we see a lot of young white people get accused of this all the time, where, they're doing mission work in Africa and they're taking pictures with the people that they're helping and writing these captions that lets you know that it was purely for the picture and not for the benefit of that person. And it's like, don't make a spectacle of the person that you're helping, because that doesn't help. Like, when it boils down to it,
right,
just do the work and have the personal currency, and knowing that, I did something for somebody else and I did the best that I could for them, and not oh, I did this and man, I got 1,000 likes. I got to keep doing this. This is going to get my numbers up, you know?
Right. Right.
So hopefully we get better about that and find the balance in between doing the work and showing the work. And I think it's because of those people we were just talking about that a lot of people have the opinion of the entire community that we're not doing enough, because we see those people more than we see the people who are doing the work behind the scenes, because that would, go against being behind the scenes with what you were doing if you were putting it out there all the time.
Right.
So in closing, people, isolate your great and figure out, harness, channel, identify what you do great. You don't see doctors teaching plumbing classes at, the Y. You don't see people stepping out of what they can do well and pass on to others, because that's not the best way to do it. Or you do see it, but then does it really help? If we were, as individuals, all decided to do what we did great, that would have far more impact in the community than us all trying to do everything, because we'd be stepping on each other's toes and really not helping anybody but ourselves to feel like we're doing something. Ultimately, just be great at you, and that's what you pass on to others in the community. If you can create other great yous in the community or inspire other people to find what's great about them and pass that on, that's how we collectively uplift. I don't know, Brandon, do you want to add anything to that as we close out?
Man, you said be great about 15 times. They're going to think I'm paying you about that.
Invoice is on its way.
I completely... Okay, calm down. But yeah, I completely agree. It's all about, you said isolate your great. I say embrace your great and really, truly figure out what it is that you're passionate about. Figure out what it is that you want your impact and what your footprint to look like, and really focus on that, and know that, one step forward is a step in the right direction. So if we're all taking those steps, however, big or small they may be, and we're all kind of mobilizing our passions, like you said, the community in its holistic sense is going to be 10 times better than one person trying to save the world and put the whole community on his or her back. So completely ditto and co-sign everything that you just said, and all 12 of the be greats that you said in that statement as well.
Cool. And while we're talking about being great, I'll give you one last plug. Tell the people where they can find out about you, what you do, and what you're going to be doing in the future.
Yeah, so the number one way to find out would be to connect with me on Instagram. We talked about social currency, but that's where you can find all of, the information about my nonprofits and the groups that I work with and my teams. So my Instagram is at thatguybmills, ThatGuyBmills, or you can connect with me on my website, brandonemiller.com, or any social channel. It's all That Guy B Mills. So got a lot of stuff, coming up with the nonprofits. The Two Fly fundraiser, we'll be having our fundraisers in DC, New York, Chicago, Austin, Houston, coming up in the next few months. The Black Bordel will be having our entrepreneurship conference in September, October timeframe in Atlanta. So be on the lookout for that. Those are the big announcements.
Brandon, thank you for coming on and having this important conversation with me. I appreciate you. To those who are listening, thank you for listening. And if you like what you've heard today, do me a favor or two or seven. One, tell a friend, share the wealth, be great and helping me out. Do your part in helping me out and share this with somebody. Let them know we're talking about some dope things. Two, did I say one start off or A? I don't remember. But two, you can go on your preferred podcast listening platform and review. You can give me stars. You can write a review, whatever you feel like. Just do something that helps me out in the long run. And three, or C, keep listening. I appreciate you guys. If you want to join in the conversation, you have a comment, you can definitely reach out on Instagram or Twitter at UNGENTRIFIEDPod, or at our website, ungentrifiedpodcast.com. Of course, you can find me, Kent Johnson, your host, at Kent, KENT_ESQ on both Instagram and Twitter. Again, Brandon, thank you for coming on with me today. And we'll talk to you guys next time.